Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 711. This week, we make a quick side trip. Earlier this week, I was asked why I did the Reread Saturday feature. Today, I offer a short explanation and highlight the experiments I'm running as part of our reread of Coaching Agile Teams by Lyssa Adkins. We also have a visit from Jon M. Quigley. In this installment of his Alpha and Omega of Product Development, Jon and I discuss the role of the team lead in Agile teams that have coaches, Scrum masters, and just might be self-organizing. There is a role, but it's not the classic version that's in common use. Why I do Reread Saturday. Reread Saturday is a long-running column featured on my blog at tcagley.wordpress.com and tomcagley.com. The books selected for the column are nominated and then voted on by readers. Because most of the books are selected by the acclaim from readers of the blog, the reread is sometimes actually the first read for me. During the reread, I read, discuss, and highlight concepts chapter by chapter. There are three major reasons for the column. One, the column draws eyes. A blog without readers is a diary. Over the years, many of the top 10 annual posts have been from the reread feature. The second reason, and perhaps the original reason, was that I had not read some of these books before and really needed to read them. It was embarrassing. For some of the other books we have reread, the reread drove home the point that memory erodes over time. For example, I'm embarrassed to say I had forgotten the story of Herbie. Check out the reread of the goal. Reason 2 is the reread is a forcing function to guide behavior. The third reason is that the column generates a lot of interaction. I have heard from readers and authors with ideas and opinions as I've reread a book. The interactions have certainly improved my understanding of how work is done and how to improve. The level of interaction suggests that the readers get similar benefits. Recently, I decided to run weekly experiments based on the chapter I was reading. The weekly experiment is another forcing function. Doing an activity drives home the point so that it's harder to forget. For example, from the reread of Chapter 2 of Coaching Agile Teams, titled Expect High Performance, I am focusing on using metaphors to guide behaviors. As an experiment, I am establishing a metaphor for myself. The goal is to see whether having a metaphor changes my behavior. The concept of the weekly experiment might end up being the best reason for me to do Reread Saturday, and perhaps the best reason for you, the reader, to participate. P.S. I am not convinced the person that asked the question was looking for so much information. I actually think they were asking why read books at all when you can watch videos, which led us to a different discussion, which I'll share on another day. One last thing before we dive into Jon M. Quigley's column. Have you downloaded the book referenced in last week's interview? Check out Seeing Money Clearly at www.agileagonist.com, link in the show notes. Jon M. Quigley, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Tom, great to be here, man, as always.
Jon, by the time this runs, I think this will be probably about the first month of year 17 of this podcast.
Wow. We should have a big cake or something. There should be a big party.
Do we get to eat it too? I like my cake and eat it too, if at all
That
possible.
is a good situation if you can make it happen, for sure.
Yeah. Without losing your head over it.
Without losing your head over it, for sure.
Jon, I'm going to pick on one topic today, and maybe two. But let's start with the least controversial of the two. team leads in Agile. You have a team that's doing Scrum. They have a Scrum Master, a product owner, a bunch of people, and a team lead. What's your take on the role of a team lead on an Agile team?
I think predominantly, you say we have a Scrum Master also?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say that the Scrum Master is in charge, would be responsible for the hygiene aspects. In other words, we're not talking about bathing here. We're talking about mental and environmental concerns. I'm sorry, you need to brush your teeth more often. You're bothering us with your coffee breath. Nothing like that. That person would be in charge of, or making sure that the environment is where people can speak freely about the things they need to talk about without worrying about, some kind of repercussion. So then the lead was going to be somebody who's going to be orchestrating some of the technical work, as in facing it into the product a little more than the environment, the ambient environment to which the development is going to be occurring.
So, okay.
We could make an analog to them being like a systems engineer within this team.
Yeah,
and
I guess I
could
buy
be
that.
architecture or software architecture or things like that also.
Architectural solution engineer or solutions architect, something along those lines.
Right, or algorithm generation, helping on specific algorithms when we reach bottlenecks that the individuals can't manage, maybe come up with that on their own, optimizing an algorithm. They might say, okay, we all need to sit down and get a whiteboard, get some pens and start writing on this thing and figure out what we need to do.
So play a little bit of a scenario then. So I'm a team lead. In my head, I'm looking up a hierarchy because probably if I've taken that step into team leaddom, I've started to step away from doing and being more something else, right?
Yeah.
Am I part of the team? Am I part of management? How do I relate? How can I ensure that I'm not the one that's making it not a safe place?
Yeah, that's true. I think if you're a team lead, if it's me, and from my experience, I would say that I would be more aligned with the team because I'm still using my technical wherewithal, and probably these folks that I'm working with are missing some of the experiences that I have. Otherwise, I would not have been put in this spot. For example, maybe I've got some specific knowledge with the technology or specific knowledge in the application that can help, or both actually, that can help guide the development effort. So, and you're right, because I can think of some things that would happen with this approach in making a lead on the tech side, and that would be that voice gets to be the stronger voice, and you end up into a place that might end up like groupthink if you're not handling that well. And I think those are bad things when you're talking about development. Here's the problem with making a lead, I think, is that people but they can set that person above in terms of technical prowess or in terms of adequate of the value of the perspective that's brought into the development effort. It's kind of analog to having somebody that's very loud in your department, very strongly opinionated, and a lot of other folks that are like, well, this guy's been here or gal's been here longer than the rest of us. He probably knows what he's talking about, so I'm just going to duck in behind that rather than blurt that I think maybe you're wrong.
Yeah, that does worry me. So I've been thinking about this topic, especially recently. I actually looked up the definition of a straw boss. Ever heard the term straw boss?
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
You know what? Neither did I, but I got the gist of it right. So a straw boss, it comes from the threshing of hay. So there'd be someone who supervised the combine as it was drug across the field and, made hay. And then there would be someone who stands at the back and watches the hay come out, the straw boss. They're the number 2 person, but they have very little responsibility or authority. They just watch the hay come out, right? Because the person driving the rig has all of the manager. So there's a scenario that I've seen multiple times in recent days where a manager might have 5 or 6 teams reporting to them. Everybody in the team directly reporting to them. All of those teams. Crazy talk, I know. But
that's a lot. 5 or 6 teams. That's a
huge number. Every team has a team lead. That team lead is sort of a straw boss. They don't have any true direct managerial responsibility. They don't have anything to do with the person's review and thing, any of the team members' reviews and anything, but they're there to watch the hay, to assign the work. And they are, these teams in the 3 or 4 locations that I've seen this, and the teams are attempting to do Agile with this sort of strange hierarchical structure.
Yeah,
the team
that doesn't seem like a good thing.
Yeah, and the answer late last year when I ran into this, I thought it was the middle one, when I finally got someone that I could bend their ear on it, and the answer was, "Let's be pragmatic."
Oh God, I hate that word. I hate that word.
We're not going to adjust the structure of the organization. We're not going to make that person or these team leads solution architects. Just be pragmatic. And now, on a positive note, the day after I didn't take that contract when it was up for renewal, I mentioned that I thought that they had confused the word pragmatic with half-assed.
Yeah. My dad
in a very nice way. In a very nice way, obviously.
My dad used to use that same. He used that same phrase when things were. They looked like crap. This was done in a very poor manner, is what my take was. Yes, and I happen to agree that that's what a lot of people. When I hear the word pragmatic, that's exactly where my mind goes. I think I wrote something a few years back just on that, and I got tired of hearing people use that word. And I'm like, you're using that word to just do a crappy half-assed job, and you're going to live with the consequences, or somebody else is going to clean up the consequences of this decision that you.
Well, I think a lot of cases, somebody else lives with the consequences.
That is really the problem.
Someone moves on, or they get promoted, it gets done, and then somebody has to clean it up.
Or the person that makes the decision is up the hierarchy, but the people who have to endure the consequences of that are in what I call the lower hierarchy.
Fair.
I know that's not really a word, but
it's a good enough word, right? It's a good enough word. The issue in my mind is that we're not having the hard conversations. We're not making the hard decisions in terms of trying to focus on flow, to actually focus on what we're trying to deliver.
Yeah. Hierarchy for the sake of hierarchy is not good. I've worked in projects as a team lead, and they were not agile, but they were kind of agile-ish. I would be, because I had experience with the product line, because I had experience outside the product line, beyond the technical in terms of the application. I was the lead of a group. Some were writing code, some were running tests. I was usually writing requirement specs and things like that, or individual features specifications that were in the product, and reviewing those with systems engineering folks. And so when things were questionable in the spec, they'd come to me, or when something seemed to be missing, like, oh, what about this situation? They'd come to me and I'd say, yeah, I don't know. Let's go figure that out. We walk out to a vehicle and go play around with stuff to try and determine how that should work. So I wasn't really responsible for any, like in the context you're saying, I did not do evaluations on the folks formally. I would tell the manager of the department, hey, this is the way things are working right now, and this person is not really working out. You probably need to find them a better place, because this is dragging the rest of the team in a bad way. It's not their competency, right? Those sort of things. So the team leads make sense at times, but it's more like a technical project lead or something maybe like that. But in the context of an agile, I'm not so sure in the context we talked about earlier, that can probably work. But when there's some kind of arbitrary figurehead in some lower form of hierarchy for the sake of lower form of hierarchy, I think you're doing damage.
Yeah, I buy that. I see 3 sort of themes in terms of team leads. There's the team lead as voice of management, that they do some of the managerial functions. They might be dealing with the extrinsic, I hate that word, I can't say it, the external sort of factors that have to be dealt with. That's a kind of team lead. There's the team lead that's the straw boss that we talked about, who hands out work, who reports back up, and is a way of the middle management hierarchy having an extended span of control, so that they can have a larger span of control. But they're just there basically to be the team whip kind of thing. And then there's and you sort of led me down the solution architect. How about thinking of them as an enabler to the team, whether it's servant leader, technical architect, enabler, who makes the team perform better? And that's that's different in my mind. So I see that role making sense even in an agile scenario, right? That's fundamentally different than the Scrum Master, who's there for the process, right?
Yeah, they're there for process and those hygiene factors, right? Let's make sure that we're competent, capable of producing as we can in this environment. So I need to make sure the environment's well, remove the obstacles, not just for the product development work, but those irritants, those disputes between our team members. I'd like to refer to them as combatants. Help mediate those things to keep things as smooth as possible, knowing that the turbulence is not a bad thing. But you can't just let it sit there and make things worse in your team. That's really what the Scrum Master is doing. That's not they don't proffer technical solutions or propose even technical solutions, in my experience.
No, rarely. And there's a distinct argument that even if they are technical in nature, that's probably not where they should be putting their thumb on, because that is, I think you've stepped over the line of coach at that point and become a participant.
Yeah, I think that's true. And if you're focusing on those technical attributes, you're removing that from your team and their opportunity to learn. And that's what a big chunk of this is. And on top of that, if you're focusing on those things, you're probably not paying the attention you should be to those hygiene factors of your team.
True statement. Jon, fantastic. How would people continue the conversation?
They can reach me at john.quigley@valuetransform.com. That's the email address, or they can follow me on LinkedIn at Jon M. Quigley. And they can follow Value Transform on LinkedIn as well as a business. At Value Transformation, I think.
We'll have those links in the show notes. Jon, as usual, this is fantastic. Maybe next time we talk about Jell-O?
Maybe next time we talk about Jell-O. I'll be better prepared to talk about Jell-O, other than the fact it's horse food.
This week, Reread Saturday news. You remember Reread Saturday. This week, Chapter 2 of Coaching Agile Teams by Lyssa Adkins. The chapter is titled Expect High Performance. As a coach, you need to have high expectations of yourself and those you are coaching. Remember, buy a copy of Coaching Agile Teams by Lyssa Adkins and read along. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, Jim Benson has a new book titled The Collaboration Equation. The first sentence in the description of the book is, "It is the base of human condition. We need other people in order to live, but always seem to be at odds with each other." We went on from there. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?